Number 1. Casey Anthony. Casey Anthony was a 22-year-old single mother living in Orlando, Florida, with her parents and her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee. To most people, they seemed like a normal family. Kaylee was a happy, playful child, and her grandparents adored her. But behind closed doors, things weren't as perfect as they looked. Casey had a history of lying, partying, and constantly clashing with her parents. In 2008, her life, and Kaylee's, would become the center of one of the most shocking cases in America. In mid-June 2008, Kaylee suddenly disappeared, but it wasn't reported right away. In fact, no one outside the family even knew she was missing until a whole month later. On July 15th, Casey's mother, Cindy Anthony, called 911 and said something terrifying, that her granddaughter had been missing for 31 days, and her daughter's car smelled like there had been a dead body inside. Casey told police that Kaylee wasn't her nanny, named Zenediah Fernandez Gonzalez, but when police investigated, they found out the woman didn't exist. Casey had made her up. As they questioned her further, the lies just kept piling up. She said she worked at Universal Studios, but when officers took her there, she finally admitted she hadn't worked there in years. Detectives quickly began to suspect that Casey knew far more than she was saying. Then, in December 2008, 6 months after Kaylee vanished, a utility worker discovered the small skeletal remains in a wooded area near the Anthony family home. It was Kaylee. A medical examiner couldn't determine the exact cause of death, but duct tape was found around her skull, suggesting foul play. Casey was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The trial began in May 2011 and lasted 6 weeks. Prosecutors claimed Casey had killed Kaylee because she wanted to live a carefree life without the burden of motherhood. They showed pictures of Casey out partying during the month Kaylee was missing. They also revealed internet searches from the family computer for terms like chloroform and how to make weapons. But Casey's defense team gave the jury a different story. They argued that Kaylee accidentally drowned in the family pool, and that Casey's father, George Anthony, helped cover it up. They said that Casey's strange behavior was due to years of trauma and abuse. George denied those claims, but the defense never had to prove their story, only raised enough doubts. On July 5th, 2011, the verdict shook the country. Casey Anthony was found not guilty of murder, manslaughter, and child abuse. She was only convicted of lying to the police and was released shortly after. The public was outraged. Many people believed she had gotten away with killing her own child, but in the eyes of the law, there wasn't enough evidence to convict her. Since then, Casey has lived mostly out of the public eye, though she's made a few attempts to speak out or start over. Number 2. Dalia Depalito. Dalia Depalito looked like someone who had it all together. She was young, attractive, and living in sunny South Florida with her new husband. But what most people didn't see was what was happening behind closed doors. It all started when Dalia secretly met with someone she believed was a hitman. She wanted to have her husband, Michael Depalito, dead, and she was serious about it. She offered $7,000 to have him killed and even gave details about when and where it should happen. But what Dalia didn't know was that the hitman she was talking to was actually an undercover police officer. The man had been tipped off by one of Dalia's ex-boyfriends, who said he had been planning something dangerous. So the police set up a sting. They wired the fake hitman with microphone and hidden camera. They recorded Dalia making the deal. She didn't hold back. On video, she calmly said she was 5,000% sure she wanted her husband dead. A few days later, police seized a fake crime scene outside the couple's home. They called Dalia and told her her husband had been murdered. Cameras were rolling when she showed up, crying and acting shocked. But the entire thing was a setup. Moments later, police took her to the station and told her the truth. Michael was alive, and she had been caught on tape trying to have him killed. The video of her fake reaction and her cold, calm planning with the fake hitman quickly went viral. It was shared on news sites, talk shows, and even ended up in reality TV shows. People couldn't believe what they were watching. Dalia's case went to trial in 2011, and it didn't go well for her. The jury saw the video of her sitting in a car, casually discussing her husband's murder. The defense argued that it was all part of a planned video for a reality show and that it wasn't serious, but the jury didn't buy it. She was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison, but the story didn't end there. Her conviction was later thrown out due to legal issues, and she was granted a new trial. In her second trial in 2016, the jury couldn't reach a decision, but during her third trial in 2017, she was once again found guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. This time, the judge sentenced Dalia 16 years in prison. She's still behind bars today, serving her sentence in Florida. Michael Depalito, the man she tried to have killed, survived it all and said he couldn't believe someone he loved could turn on him like that. Dalia has always claimed she was set up, and her legal team says she never really wanted her husband dead, but the video evidence and her own words tell a very different story. Number 3. Amelia Carr. Amelia Carr came from a troubled background, but no one expected her life to spiral into something this dark. By her mid-20s, she was already a mother of 4, but also angry, jealous, and caught in a deadly love triangle. In 2009, Amelia took part in a crime so disturbing that it shocked even veteran detectives in Florida. She didn't just help kill someone, she helped bury a woman alive. The case began in Ocala, Florida in early 2009. Amelia Carr had once been engaged to a man named Joshua Folkham, but the relationship ended badly. Joshua eventually married another woman, Heather Strong, who became the mother of his children. Amelia was furious, and that anger only grew when she and Joshua started secretly seeing each other again. What made things worse? A nasty custody battle. Joshua and Heather were fighting for their 2 kids, and Amelia wanted to see Heather gone. On February 15th, 2009, Heather disappeared. Just days before, she filed a restraining order against Joshua, saying she feared for her life. Unfortunately, that warning came too late. According to prosecutors, Amelia and Joshua lured Heather to a trailer, tied her to a chair, and interrogated her about the custody case. Amelia then helped Joshua stuff Heather into a storage bin, where they both watched her suffocate to death. Then, they buried her body behind Amelia's mother's house, covering it with cement blocks. At first, both Amelia and Joshua acted like they didn't know where Heather had gone, but police were suspicious. Heather's last known location tracked back to them, and when investigators dug deeper, their stories started falling apart. Eventually, both were arrested. The turning point came when Amelia confessed during a taped jailhouse conversation, admitting that she helped plan the murder and stood by while it happened. She claimed it was Joshua who killed Heather, but her involvement couldn't be denied. Amelia was charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. Prosecutors described her as manipulative, jealous, and cruel. They told the jury that Amelia could have stopped it at any time, but she didn't. Instead, she wants the mother to die slowly, then helped bury her like trash. Her defense tried to paint her as the victim of Joshua, someone abused, controlled, and pushed to the edge, but the jury didn't buy it. Her taped confession and actions after the murder were too much to ignore. In 2010, Amelia Carr was convicted of murder. Amelia Carr was originally sentenced to death, making her the 3rd woman on Florida's death row at the time. But in 2017, her sentence was reduced to life in prison after new laws changed how Florida handles death penalty cases. She is now serving that life sentence without parole. Number 4. Jennifer Mee. Jennifer Mee was once known as the Hiccup Girl. At just 15, she made national headlines for having uncontrollable hiccups, over 50 times a minute, that doctors couldn't explain. She went viral before viral was even a thing, appearing on the Today Show and other major outlets. But just a few years later, Jennifer was back in the headlines, this time for murder, and the bubbly teen America once rooted for had turned into a convicted killer. In October 2010, Jennifer Mee was 19 years old and living in St. Petersburg, Florida. She had moved from her hiccup fame and was now hanging out with a rough crowd. That's when she got involved in a robbery plan that quickly turned deadly. Jennifer met a man named Shannon Griffin, 22 years old, through social media. She invited him to come meet her late at night, suggesting they might hang out. What Shannon didn't know was that he was being set up. When he arrived, Jennifer led him into a trap. Two of her male friends, Lamont Newton and Laron Rayford, were waiting in the shadows. They pulled a gun on Shannon and tried to rob him. But things went wrong fast. Shannon fought back, and during the struggle, he was shot and killed. The plan had been to steal his money, but now they were facing murder. It didn't take long for police to figure out what happened. Jennifer admitted in a taped interview that she had lured Shannon to the spot, knowing her friends planned to rob him. She said she didn't expect him to be killed, but by law, that didn't matter. Florida's felony murder rule says that if someone dies during a robbery, everyone involved can be charged with murder, even if they didn't pull the trigger. Jennifer was arrested along with both men. Sadly, the former Hiccup Girl was facing a first-degree murder charge. At trial, Jennifer's defense team argued that she didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. They said she was young, naive, and being manipulated by older guys. The prosecutors pointed to her taped confession and the fact that she was the one who set the entire thing in motion. They told the jury that without Jennifer, the robbery wouldn't have happened, and if the robbery hadn't happened, Shannon Griffin would still be alive. The jury didn't take long to decide. In 2013, Jennifer Mee was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She's now serving her time at Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida, the same prison where several other high-profile female offenders are held. Jennifer still claims she didn't mean for anyone to die, but the law didn't see it that way, and neither did the jury. Number 5. Catherine McBanal. Catherine McBanal wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. She wasn't even at the scene, but prosecutors said she helped connect all the pieces. Catherine found herself in the middle of a murder-for-hire plot that took down a respected law professor and exposed deep family secrets, jealousy, and money. The victim was Don Merkel, a well-known law professor at Florida State University in Tallahassee. He was shot and killed in his own driveway on July 18, 2014, after returning home from dropping off his kids. It was a shocking, broad daylight murder in an upscale neighborhood. At first, the police had no idea who did it. There was no signs of robbery, and it felt targeted, like someone wanted him gone. The investigation took years, but slowly, the truth started to unravel. Dan had been going through a bitter custody battle with his ex-wife, Wendy Adelson. The divorce had gotten ugly, and Wendy's family, especially her mother and brother, were deeply involved. Wendy wanted to move the kids to South Florida to be closer to her family, but Dan said no, and the courts sided with him. Prosecutors would later argue that Wendy's family was so desperate to get rid of Dan, they helped arrange his murder. And that's where Catherine McBanal came in. Catherine was dating Charlie Adelson, Wendy's wealthy and flashy brother. At the same time, she had 2 kids with another man, Sigfredo Garcia, a known gang member. According to prosecutors, Charlie used Catherine to hire Sigfredo and his friend, Luis Rivera, to carry out the murder. She was accused of being the go-between, the one who connected the Adelson family to the 2 hitmen. Phone records, cash deposits, and even suspicious texts all pointed back to her. In October 2016, 2 years after Dan was killed, Garcia and Rivera were arrested and charged with his murder. A few months later, in 2017, Catherine was arrested too. The first time Catherine went to trial in 2019, the jury couldn't agree. It ended in a mistrial. The prosecutors weren't done. They tried her again in 2022, and this time, the evidence stuck. Rivera had already taken a plea deal and testified that he and Garcia were paid $100,000 to kill Don Merkel. He claimed Catherine was the one who arranged everything, giving them the details, the payment, and helping clean things up afterward. Prosecutors showed that Catherine had no stable job at the time, but suddenly had a lot of cash coming in after the murder. And her phone record showed calls between her and Charlie Addison shortly before after Dan was killed. In May 2022, Catherine McBanal was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 2 additional 30-year sentences. Her ex-boyfriend, Sigfredo Garcia, is also serving a life sentence, and Luis Rivera got 19 years for cooperating. Charlie Addison was finally arrested in 2022 as well, and he's now awaiting trial, accused of being the one who ordered the hit. Catherine still claims she's innocent, but to the jury and the Dan Merkel's family, the evidence told a very different story. Number 6. Tiffany Cole. Tiffany Cole didn't grow up in a violent home or have a troubled past. In fact, she seemed like a regular woman from South Carolina. But in 2005, she became part of one of the most disturbing and heartbreaking crimes Florida had seen in years. What started as a visit to old family friends ended in a double murder, a shocking plan fueled by greed. In 2005, Tiffany Cole and her boyfriend, Michael Jackson, not the singer, drove from South Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida. They were visiting a couple named Carol and Reggie Sumner, 2 kind-hearted retirees in their 60s. The Sumners had once sold Tiffany's father a car and even let her stay with them for a while. They trusted her. But Tiffany and her boyfriend weren't there to catch up. They had a dark plan. Along with 2 other men, Bruce Nixon and Alan Reed, they decided to rob the elderly couple and kill them afterwards so that they couldn't be identified. On the night of July 8th, they forced their way into the Sumners' home, tied them up, and made them give up their ATM PIN numbers. Then, in a terrifying and cruel act, he put the couple in the trunk of their own car, still alive, and drove them to a remote area in Georgia. There, they dug a shallow grave before putting the couple inside the trunk. Once they arrived, they buried the Sumners alive, where they were still tied up and helpless. It was one of the most brutal parts of the case. The couples suffocated underground together. After the murders, Tiffany and the group started pulling money from the Sumners' bank account, nearly $1,000 a day. They used the stolen cash to buy hotel rooms, fast food, and even a car. But their spending spree didn't last long. Police quickly connected the missing couple to their bank withdrawals. Surveillance cameras caught the group at various ATMs, and witnesses came forward. Within days, all 4 suspects were arrested. Tiffany admitted she had bought the duct tape and shovel used in the crime, and that she was part of the plan. She claimed she didn't actually kill the couple herself, but investigators saw her as deeply involved. In court, prosecutors didn't hold back. They said Tiffany Cole played a key role, helping plan the kidnapping, buying the supplies, and staying involved through every step. Even though she didn't physically bury the Sumners, her participation made her just as responsible. The jury agreed. In 2007, Tiffany was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and robbery. The evidence, including her taped interviews and ATM footage, was overwhelming. Tiffany Cole was sentenced to death, making her one of the few women on Florida's death row. She later appealed and her sentence was reviewed multiple times. But as of now, she's still awaiting execution. Her co-defendants also faced harsh sentences. Michael Jackson was sentenced to death. Alan Reed got death too. Bruce Nixon, the one who cooperated with police and showed them where the bodies were buried, got 45 years in exchange for his testimony. Today, Tiffany Cole sits on death row at Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida. Her case continues to shock people, not just because of how violent it was, but because it came from someone the victims had once trusted. Number 7. Misty Crosslin. Most people wouldn't expect a 17-year-old girl to be at the center of Florida's most talked about missing child cases. But Misty Crosslin wasn't just any teenager. She was the last known person to see 5-year-old Haley Cummings alive. What started as a routine night of babysitting would turn Misty's life upside down, leave a trail of questions that still haven't been answered. It was the night of February 9, 2009. Misty was staying at the home of her boyfriend, Ronald Cummings, watching his 2 young kids while he worked overnight. Everything seemed normal until the next morning, when Misty called 911 just before 3:30 a.m. to report that little Haley was missing from her bed. There were no signs of breaking. Misty told police she had put the kids to sleep, but when she woke up, Haley was gone. At first, it was treated as a possible abduction, but soon, investigators noticed inconsistencies in Misty's story. She changed her timeline more than once, and her emotional reaction didn't seem to match the seriousness of the situation. As the days went on, Misty became the focus of the investigation. Detectives believed she knew more than she was saying, but without hard proof or a confession, they couldn't charge her. Haley's case remained unsolved, and Misty continued to deny any involvement. Nearly a year later, in January 2010, Misty was back in the news, but this time, it had nothing to do with the missing girl. She was arrested during a major undercover drug operation along with Ronald Cummings and others. Misty had been caught on camera selling prescription pills. She was involved in multiple deals over several days. Police said it was one of the biggest drug stings in that part of Florida in years. Many people thought the arrest might finally lead to answers about what happened to Haley. Investigators hoped Misty would open up in exchange for a lighter sentence, but that never happened. She stood by her original story. Misty went to trial facing multiple drug trafficking charges. Her defense argued that she was young, inexperienced, and being used by older men who took advantage of her. Misty said she didn't fully understand what she was doing and felt pressure to go along with the drug deals. But prosecutors didn't agree. They played recordings of her setting up deals and handing out her pills. The court said she was old enough to know what she was doing, and that the amount of drugs involved was too serious to ignore. In 2011, Misty Crosslin was sentenced to 25 years in prison. It was a shocking sentence for someone still in her teens, and some people felt it was too harsh. Today, Misty is still behind bars, and Haley Cummings is still missing. Misty had never been charged in connection with the girl's disappearance, but many believe she knows more than she had ever admitted. Number 8. Denise Williams. Denise Williams appeared to be a quiet, church-going woman, a dedicated mother, and a grieving widow. For nearly 2 decades, she lived without suspicion. But in 2018, her picture-perfect image shattered when investigators uncovered a murder-for-hire plot that had been buried for 17 years. And at the center of it all, a twisted love triangle with her best friend's husband. The story begins back in December 2000, when Denise's husband, Mike Williams, went missing while duck hunting on Lake Seminole in Florida. At first, everyone assumed it was a tragic accident. His boat was found, but there were no signs of him. Authorities believe he had drowned and been eaten by alligators, a heartbreaking theory many accepted at the time. Denise collected $1.75 million in life insurance and eventually moved on, but the truth was far darker than anyone imagined. Years passed and rumors never stopped. People close to Mike felt something wasn't right. Then in 2017, the case finally broke open, and what came out shocked the entire state of Florida. In 2017, Brian Winchester, Mike's best friend and the man Denise eventually married, confessed to the killing. But he didn't come forward out of guilt. He was trying to avoid prison as a separate kidnapping case involving Denise. In his confession, Brian said Denise had helped plan Mike's murder. They were having an affair while she was still married to Mike. Denise didn't want a divorce, didn't want to share custody, and didn't want her reputation ruined. So instead, she and Brian came up with a plan to kill him. On the morning of the hunting trip, Brian pushed Mike into the water, expecting him to drown. But Mike survived. So Brian shot him in the face and buried his body near Carr Lake. For 17 years, Brian and Denise kept the secret. They eventually got married, but the relationship fell apart. And when Denise tried to leave him, Brian snapped and later held her at gunpoint. That led to his arrest, which eventually brought the truth to light. Was Brian's confession and immunity deal in place? Denise was arrested in 2018 and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and being an accessory after the fact. She pled not guilty. During her trial, Brian took the stand and described the entire plot, how they planned it together, how he killed Mike, and how they covered it up for years. Denise's defense argued that Brian acted alone and was blaming her to avoid prison, but the jury didn't buy it. In December 2018, Denise Williams was found guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder and received additional time for the other charges. Mike's body had been found the year before, buried near a boat landing where Brian said it would be. After nearly 2 decades of lies, the truth finally came out, and Denise, once seen as a grieving widow, was now exposed as a cold, calculated killer. Number 9. Rebecca Fenton. Rebecca Fenton always claimed she was just a wife, not a killer. She lived in a nice home, drove a sports car, and seemed to have a stable marriage. But in 2008, her husband was found shot to death, and they followed her home, and for years, Rebecca said she had nothing to do with it. She stuck to that story until the very end, even after the jury didn't believe her. It happened on Super Bowl Sunday, February 3rd, 2008. Rebecca and her husband, Larry Fenton, had just moved into a new house in Clearwater, Florida. That day, Rebecca said she went out for a jog. When she came back, she claimed she found Larry dead, lying on the floor with 5 gunshot wounds, including one to the head. There were no signs of forced entry, no robbery, and nothing taken from the house. Police immediately thought it was strange. Larry had no known enemies, and while Rebecca looked upset, her story didn't quite add up. She said she found him and called 911. But when police arrived, she had already changed her clothes, and her behavior felt oddly calm for someone who had just discovered their husband murdered. At first, there wasn't enough evidence to arrest her, but detectives kept looking. They noticed that Rebecca's phone records and behavior before and after the murder seemed suspicious. Most importantly, gunshot residue was found later on the inside of the clothes she had worn that day. Investigators also uncovered that Rebecca and Larry had been having marriage issues. Larry was planning to end the relationship, but she stood to gain financially from his life insurance. It took 4 years, but in 2011, police arrested Rebecca Fenton and charged her with first-degree murder. In 2015, Rebecca finally went to trial. Prosecutors painted her as cold and calculated. They argued that she shot Larry, cleaned herself up, changed her clothes, and then staged the scene to make it look like someone else had done it. The defense said there were no murder weapons found, and no one could replace Rebecca at the exact moment of shooting happened. They claimed that the case was built on circumstantial evidence, and pointed to the fact that it took years to even charge her. But the gunshot residue, the life insurance motive, and her inconsistent behavior were enough for the jury. Rebecca Fenton was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, she still says she's innocent. In interviews from prison, she insists that someone else killed her husband and that she's the victim of wrongful conviction. But jurors and investigators say the evidence told a different story. Rebecca is currently serving her sentence in Florida's women's prison, and even now, she hasn't changed her version of events, even though no one else believes it.